This story is about a document that sits in every family folder and looks like the most harmless record in the world. A yellow sheet with a seal, the one parents once waited in line for and signed without looking. Nobody taught you to read it as a contract. Nobody explained why a piece of paper that merely records the fact of your birth is manufactured to the same security standards as a high-denomination banknote. This is the breakdown of what you signed before you ever learned to hold a pen. What's at stake here is not theory and not philosophy. What's at stake is your legal status, which governs every encounter you have with the bank, the tax authority, and the courts. The auditor lays out the cold mechanics in plain terms. Why in the financial system your name is worth a specific sum of money, why the state's debt, the one nobody told you about, is personally secured by you, and why the fine for breaking rules you never signed comes to you specifically. Running in parallel is an old law passed amid the ashes of a burned city more than 300 years ago. And it turns out that this is the very law that determines how the courtroom sees you when you walk in to defend your rights. This is not about a conspiracy. It's about an offer that millions of people accepted in silence and confirm every day with every signature they give. Every field in a form, every card in your wallet, every roadside citation, these are all links in a single chain, and the auditor shows exactly how it tightens and where the lock is. What would you do if you found out that your passport is not addressed to you, the living person, but to a legal fiction with the same name, and that the bills, summonses, and citations arrive in its name, not yours? Would you agree to keep playing the role of its guardian, or would you demand to see the contract? Listen, that is what this story is about. Take any banknote out of your wallet and hold it in your hand. Feel the characteristic crinkle when you bend it. Run your finger over the embossed printing. Hold it up to the light and look at the watermarks. Now take your birth certificate and place it beside it. If you examine both documents through a magnifying glass, your brain will experience a jolt of recognition. The same paper density, the same intaglio security mesh, the same red serial numbers. The only difference is that the banknote is backed by trust in the state, while the birth certificate is backed by your future life. You are used to thinking of this document as a record of a biological fact, a sentimental reminder of your first day of existence. But the legal reality is cynical and cold. The moment the ink dried on that paper, you ceased to be simply a living human being. You became an asset, a unit of accounting, an inventory number in a global registry. While you are watching this video, your paper double, created by that very form, is participating in interbank market operations, backing the national debt whose existence nobody told you about. This is where the forensic audit of the most sweeping fraud in the history of modern civilization begins. No need to take anyone's word for it, only evidence, provisions of the commercial code, banking regulations, and archival records. The auditor will expose the mechanism that turns living blood into typographic ink and answer the central question: why is your name in your passport written exclusively in capital letters? This is not a conspiracy investigation. It is an instruction manual for reading the contract you signed before you could hold a pen. The sterile glare of a laboratory spotlight pulls a tattered mid-century birth certificate form out of the darkness. To the uninitiated, it is a yellow piece of paper with seals. But to a forensic auditor trained to hunt for traces of financial crime, this sheet is screaming fraud. Under ultraviolet light, hidden fibers and microtext appear that are invisible to the naked eye. And in the silence of the laboratory filled with the smell of ozone from running scanners, it becomes clear. What we have before us is not a civil record. It is a bearer security. Analysis of the material leaves no doubt. The document is printed on special high-security paper, identical to what the American Banknote Company or Gosnack use for the issuance of currency and stock certificates. Why would recording a biological fact of birth require protection at the level of a treasury bond? The answer lies in economics, not demography. The state does not spend such resources on simple statistics, and this paper has monetary value precisely because it represents a title of ownership. The auditor's gaze lingers on the serial number stamped in red ink. In the world of finance, the color red traditionally denotes liabilities or debt obligations, and this number is structurally identical to a SIUSAIP code, the kind assigned to stocks and bonds for tracking on stock exchanges. It is a product label. From the moment the number is assigned, the newborn enters the database not as a person, but as a unit of human capital against which the state immediately gains the ability to issue debt instruments. Pay attention to the terminology. At the bottom of the form stands the signature of the attending physician, but the legal language used in the document is infinitely distant from medicine. The word delivery in commercial law and shipping logistics means the delivery of cargo to the ship owner. The delivery room in this framework of reference becomes a dock, a berth, and the doctor performs the role of a port agent recording the arrival of a new vessel into the state's jurisdiction. The child literally docks, emerging from the waters of the mother. The most cynical piece of evidence is hidden in the parents field. It appears that by writing their names, the father and mother are confirming kinship, but from a legal standpoint, they are acting as informants, a specific legal term denoting whoever reports the appearance of unregistered property. By signing the form, the parents are in effect registering the emergence of a new asset and voluntarily transferring rights to it into a state trust. They are not establishing ownership of the child, they are filing a deed of title transfer. The auditor sees in this document a classic warehouse receipt. The moment the parents signed, the state acquired the legal right to dispose of the product as it saw fit. The birth certificate handed to the parents is merely a copy, a registry extract, while the original, the bill of lading, is sent to the storage vaults of statistical authorities, and the data is transmitted to international financial institutions as collateral for the country's creditworthiness. This is exactly where the substitution takes place, the one the system carefully conceals. The living human being of flesh and blood is separated from its paper embodiment. A legal fiction is created, an artificial person whom the state can tax, haul before courts, and conscript into military service. The living man is not subject to commercial law, but the paper is, and to bind you to that paper forever, the system needed a reliable hook that no one ever notices precisely because it is always right in front of their eyes. The investigation will hit a dead end if linguistics is ignored. Look closely at how the name is recorded in official documents. In the majority of cases, especially in modern databases, it is typed exclusively in capital letters. We have grown accustomed to treating this as a readability convenience or a quirk of older computer systems. But in jurisprudence, there is no such thing as accidental design. And the style in which a name is written is a code that defines your status, sovereign or slave of the system. In the age of digital etiquette, all caps is perceived as raising one's voice, as aggression, but for a lawyer it is not an emotional outburst, it is a shift in legal register. Under the rules of grammar and international legal standards, proper names are written with an initial capital, whereas writing the entire name in capital letters, known as all caps, in specialized legal dictionaries denotes not a living person, but a corporation. When the bank sends a bill with your surname set in that type, it is not addressing a biological being. It is filing a claim against the firm that bears your name. The tradition has its roots in Roman law and the concept of capitis diminutio maxima, maximum diminution of rights. In ancient Rome, when a free citizen lost his freedom and became a slave, his name changed its form in the registers, and writing it exclusively in capital letters served as the ancient graphic code of civil death. The subject was stripped of will and became an object, an inventory unit of the empire. The investigator studying these documents inevitably runs into a linguistic trap. We use the word person as a synonym for a human being, yet legally they are antonyms, since in legal English person not equal to man. The etymology of the word traces back to the Etruscan fersu, the mask worn by an actor in ancient theater to make the voice carry further. Personare. The legal person is the mask the state places on a child immediately after birth registration. For a living human being of flesh, blood, and bones cannot be placed in a document folder or sent by email, but a person can. On the Financial Analyst Monitor, each of our lives splits into two parallel streams. The first is biological existence, breathing, illness, aging. The second is the life of the namesake corporation, which accumulates debts, participates in litigation, and goes through bankruptcy proceedings. The tragedy is that a person who doesn't know the rules of this game treats both streams as a single whole and voluntarily absorbs blows meant for the mask. The legal fiction is by definition devoid of soul, conscience, and the capacity for pain, and its term of existence is unlimited. The corporation bearing your name cannot end up behind bars because it has no body. But since you identify with it, it is your body that the escort walks to the cell. This is a brilliant swap of concepts in which the court always judges the paper while a living person serves the sentence. You become the guarantor whose physical existence sustains the life of the dead double. Recall any visit to a government office or a roadside stop by a patrol officer. The first question from the representative of authority is invariable. Show your ID. Think carefully about that phrase. They are not saying, show us yourself. They are asking you to present the carrier of an inventory number. The moment you hand over the plastic card with the name in all caps, you perform the act that lawyers call joinder, adjoining, voluntarily confirming, yes, I am this firm. Why does the system need such a complex scheme of bifurcation? The answer is simple and cynical. Money. A living person possesses free will that is difficult to monetize directly without accusations of slave trading, whereas a corporation is an asset that can be pledged, resold, or securitized. Turning citizens into legal persons allowed states to use their populations as a collateral base for issuing debt obligations. And right now, picking up any document, a bank card, a utility bill, a summons, you will, in 70% of cases, see the cold, cropped, all caps type that is not merely a design choice, but an owner's brand, analogous to the mark burned into the ear of livestock. But if your name in your passport is merely a company name, then what is its market capitalization? To understand the true value of the paper double, we must return to the moment when America officially declared itself bankrupt and decided that gold was an outdated concept. We need the year when people were first openly turned into currency. To understand the mechanics of this crime, you must set aside emotion and look at history through the eyes of a crisis manager. The Great Depression, soup kitchen lines, stock market panic. It was at this exact point, as the old world was collapsing, that the greatest substitution of assets in human history was carried out. The state is a corporation that by the early 30s had become insolvent. Gold reserves did not cover the printed obligations, and so President Roosevelt issued Executive Order Sexty 200 Sto Deva. The official version framed it as a fight against hoarding, but in substance it was confiscation. All gold coins, bullion, and certificates were seized from citizens, and on April 5, 1933, the United States effectively declared itself bankrupt by abolishing the gold standard. This is where any investigator would ask the obvious question. If money is no longer backed by gold, what sustains faith in the dollar, the pound, or the ruble when the vaults are empty? The answer is simple and cynical. The collateral became you. Watch carefully. On June 5 of the same year, Congress passed Joint Resolution H.J.R. 192, establishing that the state was no longer obligated to discharge debts in gold. Instead of payment, the term discharge was introduced, meaning a set-off or write-off in which the debt was not extinguished but carried forward into the future under the guarantee of the labor of coming generations. This is where the pledge principle came into force. Since the corporation known as the United States had no physical assets remaining, it pledged its only resource, the energy of its citizens. And from that moment, every child born into the world was regarded by the system not as a new member of society, but as a unit of biological property capable of generating taxes, fines, and consumption over the next 60 years. The auditor's gaze slides across the text of the resolution and sees the cold logic of an accountant. To issue new money, the bank needs collateral, and that collateral became the birth certificate. The moment parents put their signature on that document, they, unknowingly, transferred the title of ownership over the cargo, the child, into the custody of the state. In financial accounting, this is called human life value, the monetary worth of a human life. Not a philosophical concept, but a concrete figure in budget calculations. Based on the forecast of how much profit you will generate for the system over your lifetime, government bonds are issued and traded on international markets. You are effectively a walking currency, and your signature creates credit. When you sign a mortgage agreement or a credit card application, you are not taking the bank's money. The bank is monetizing your signature, creating numbers from thin air under the guarantee of your future labor. You think you are the debtor, but in reality, you are the emission center, and the bank is merely an intermediary collecting a commission for your use of your own credit. This very scheme explains why the state so jealously monitors the registration of every citizen. An unregistered person is an unaccounted asset, dead capital against which no bonds can be issued. And without your paper double recorded in all caps, the entire pyramid of national debt would collapse in a single day. If in the dissects 1733 were turned into a commodity, an entirely different logistics was needed for its transport. A maritime law specialist, gazing at a nighttime port terminal, sees not containers but a perfect model of your legal status. You think you stand on solid ground protected by constitutions and human rights, but the documents say the opposite. Legally, the land was submerged long ago. Look at the language banks and courts use when they address you, and ask yourself, why are all financial terms connected to water? Liquidity, cash flows, frozen assets, floating rates. The word currency comes from current, meaning a flow, and a bank is the bank of a river directing that flow. These are not accidental, poetic metaphors. They are the precise terminology of Admiralty law, which governs commerce at sea, and the paradox is that the laws of the ocean were silently transplanted onto land. Traditional common law operated on land and required the presence of an injured party, a living human being with a real injury, whereas Admiralty law works differently, governing contracts between corporations and the delivery of cargo, where there are no people, only captains and goods. To judge you as cargo, the court must become a ship, and step into any courtroom to see this for yourself. The place where the defendant sits is called the dock, the same word as the berth where a vessel comes in to unload. The partition dividing the chamber is called the bar, just like the rail on a ship. And when you pass through that gate, you symbolically board a foreign vessel, leaving the jurisdiction of your own country. The main piece of evidence is always in plain sight, directly behind the judge, the national flag with gold fringe around its edges. In heraldry and military code, the gold fringe flag does not denote national sovereignty, but military or maritime jurisdiction. And that yellow border is a warning signal. Constitutional rights do not apply here. The rules of the merchant fleet and wartime prevail. In this framework, the very concept of citizenship takes on a sinister hue. The word citizenship etymologically breaks down into citizen and ship, a ship of citizens. And you are not a resident of the land, but a crew member or passenger of a corporate vessel, subordinate to a captain who on the open sea holds absolute power over the life and death of everyone on board. The auditor points to the moment you first entered this registry. It happened in the maternity hospital because the word birth sounds nearly identical to berth, a sleeping place on a ship or a berth at a dock. And when the waters break, the child literally docks at the hospital. In maritime law, there is a brutal rule. A vessel abandoned by its crew is considered salvage, a prize for whoever rescues it. And since you have never claimed your right to captain your own nameship, the state has boarded, taken the helm, and begun using this asset to transport its own debts. You pay fines and taxes not because you are a criminal, but because your vessel uses port infrastructure. And we find ourselves in a situation where the land is a legal illusion, and the global economy has converted all relationships into commercial contracts. This legal fiction of the dead captain was not invented by 20th century bankers. Its roots reach back into the black soot of the 17th century, into the ashes of the Great Fire. We traveled to London, a great fire, a catastrophe that destroyed 13,000 homes and 87 churches. But something far more important than architecture burned in that fire, because there, the presumption that you are alive burned with it. Imagine the chaos of that time. Thousands of people fled the city, many perished, bodies were reduced to ash, and the aristocracy panicked because landowners could not collect rent from missing tenants. To resolve the property crisis, Parliament passed the Cestui Act, a term from Norman French meaning the one who lives. It sounds noble, but in practice it became the most sophisticated trap in the history of jurisprudence. The act established a merciless rule. If a person did not prove their existence within 7 years, the system declared them a civil corpse, not physically but legally, and their property, along with their rights, passed into fiduciary management, into a trust controlled by the state. But why has a law passed 350 years ago for the ruins of a burned London become the core of your operating system today? This is the key piece of evidence in the investigation. When a child is born, it does not speak and does not claim its rights. And from the standpoint of the Admiralty court, that child is lost at sea. The parents, acting as informants, register the appearance of a biological body, but do not claim rights to the living soul. They register a vessel, and since no owner has come forward, the state immediately activates the protocol. Instantly, a cestui trust is created in the child's name, and that is the entity recorded in capital letters. The state becomes the trustee, managing the assets, while you, the living person, are merely the beneficiary. But only if you know who you are, because until you assert otherwise, the system considers you to be that lost Londoner who never returned from the fire. This explains the cold indifference of judges. When you enter the courtroom, they do not see a person. They see a ghost, a representative of dead property that has nowhere to speak of justice. For the dead have no voice, and the judge merely administers the trust estate left behind by a person declared missing at birth. Does the realization that in the system's eyes you have been legally dead since you left the maternity ward send a chill down your spine? If this breakdown is shifting your perspective, hit like and subscribe to the channel, because right now the mechanism of your resurrection is being revealed, and you cannot afford to miss the next step. Why does the state need such a complex scheme? Because the dead consume no resources, yet the trust generates profit, your labor, your energy, your credit feed it, and since you as the owner are absent, the state as the administrator has the right to use the trust's assets to settle the national debt. This is called usufruct, the right to use another's property and derive income from it. And the genius of the deception is that no one conceals it. The laws are published, but written in language that looks like English, yet functions like a cipher. The 1666 Trust did not vanish into the archives of the City of London. It merely changed its medium, converting parchment into silicon, and the wax seal into a cryptographic key. Today, this mechanism runs at the speed of light on Wall Street servers, and for the financial system, your life is not a biography. It is an asset with volatility, liquidity, and an expiration date. Welcome to the trading floor, where souls are the commodity. Look at the forensic auditor's screen. Into the search field of a Bloomberg-style terminal, he types not an oil or gold ticker, but the serial number you are used to seeing on your birth certificate. The system pauses for a moment, queries closed treasury databases, and returns a trading chart. This is not an error. Your certificate has a CUSI PI number, a unique security identification code, exactly like the one on an Apple or Tesla bond. And that chart is the cardiogram of your trust, where red and green candles reflect how the global market assesses the tax collection potential attached to your name. The CUSI PI converts the paper issued in the maternity ward into a tradable financial instrument. And for a broker, there is no difference between a ton of wheat and an ordinary citizen. Both are resources that can be pledged, resold, or used as collateral for derivatives. Here we arrive at the central mystery of your document wallet, the Social Security number or its equivalent. You are used to thinking of those digits as a personal identifier, but in the logic of banking audit, they are the account number of the very trust the state created. And you are not the account owner, but the guarantor whose energy fills that account with liquidity. Watch carefully. When you go to the bank for a mortgage, you are certain that the bank is lending you money it has earned or attracted from depositors. This is a lie concealed behind complex terminology. The moment you sign the loan agreement, a monetization of your signature occurs. Your promise to pay in the future is a promissory note, a security, and you have just created money from thin air with your obligation to labor. The bank does not give you its own funds. It takes your promissory note, books it as an asset, and against that asset issues you numbers on a screen called credit, meaning you borrowed money from yourself, from your future labor, and the bank is merely the transaction administrator, taking an extortionate interest rate for the privilege. This is called securitization, turning your signature into a liquid commodity. In professional circles, the abbreviation ID is often decoded not as identifier, but as instrument of debt. And every time you present your passport, you confirm that you are the agent of a dead trust, prepared to bear liability for its obligations. The debt instruments backed by birth certificates are known as birth certificate bonds, and they are not traded on the open market available to private investors to avoid panic, but circulate in closed, dark pools of liquidity for institutional players. Pension funds and insurance giants buy packages of these bonds, betting on how many taxes and fines the next generation will generate. Consider the cynicism of this arithmetic. If you are a law-abiding citizen, you are a blue-chip stock, a reliable asset with low yield and high stability. If you are a habitual offender frequently hauled before courts, you are a high-risk junk bond with the potential for rapid payouts through fines and confiscations. The prison system in this scheme is nothing more than a method of managing troubled assets, warehousing them to minimize losses. And the sums involved are colossal. The average estimated value of a developed world citizen's lifetime labor, built into the budget at birth, runs into the millions of dollars. That is precisely how much the state plans to extract from you through direct taxes, inflation, and consumption. The forensic auditor closes the terminal, the screen goes dark, but the transactions continue in the darkness. The system is flawless. It sold you debt disguised as assistance and slavery disguised as citizenship. But if what is traded on the exchange is not you but your paper double, a logical question arises. Who bears the responsibility when that double breaks the rules? And why is it you who pays, not the trust? When a patrol officer pulls you over for speeding, you leave the realm of high financial mathematics and enter the zone of direct contact with the collection mechanism. The officer writes the citation not to you as a biological organism, but to your straw man, an invoice issued to a legal fiction. Look at the surrealist architecture of this process through an investigator's eyes. You stand in the courtroom, the judge looks not at you, but through you, at the papers lying before him. And in that moment, the room contains two objects with the same name: a living person of flesh and blood, and a stack of documents, a legal fiction. The judge is essentially a banker whose task is to connect those two entities in order to execute a transaction. In legal jargon, there is a term, straw man, a concept borrowed from military tactics, where it referred to a decoy used to draw enemy fire. In commercial law, this is a front person, a nominal asset holder who absorbs the blows of the system, and your name written in capital letters in the court summons is precisely that straw man. The trap snaps shut in the first second of the hearing. The judge poses the standard procedural question, "Are you name?" But this is not an identity check. It is a commercial offer. The judge is asking, are you willing to voluntarily act as the trustee of the trust bearing the same name and accept liability for its debts? When you answer yes, the legal act of joinder occurs, a merger in which you create a bridge between the world of the living and the world of dead paper, voluntarily putting on the mask of the straw man. Now, the court is not judging the trust, which cannot sit in prison, but you. You have placed your body in the path of a blow aimed at the corporation. Every fine in this system is not a punishment for violating ethical norms, but a charge, a commercial fee for the use of the system's privileges, and the word carries the same electrical and financial meaning as charging a battery. The system is depleted and demands your energy, the currency earned by your time. The prosecutor is not accusing you of a crime against a person. He is representing the interests of the state as the injured corporation. And a traffic violation is a breach of internal corporate regulations you subscribe to when you receive your driver's license. You are an employee who violated the charter, not a free citizen who committed a transgression. This is precisely why attorneys are so important to the system. The term derives from the French "attorn," meaning to transfer or to assign, and an attorney does not defend your human rights. His task is to professionally represent your straw man to the court, ensuring that the ritual sacrifice of your wallet proceeds strictly according to commercial code procedure. If you attempt to assert your constitutional rights in court, the judge may call a recess or send you for psychiatric evaluation. From the system's perspective, this is logical, since the straw man has no rights, only obligations, and when the mask tries to speak of freedom, it is perceived as a system glitch in the software of the court session. This entire construction rests solely on your legal illiteracy. The court proceeds from the presumption that you are the trustee of your trust, but that you are acting as someone legally incompetent. You cannot separate yourself from your name. You do not declare yourself a beneficiary rather than a defendant. And in commercial law, silence or mistaken action is equated with consent. Every time you pay a fine without protest, you confirm the legitimacy of the hidden contract and settle the debts of your double, not suspecting for a moment that the double was created to serve you, not the other way around. The straw man was meant to be your shield, but through the loss of knowledge, it became a prison uniform. If the prison is built from paper, can paper tear down its walls? A maritime law specialist, looking at the stacks of documents in a notary's office, sees not bureaucracy, but an arsenal. In commercial law, there is an axiom. Truth is a sovereign judgment declared under oath and unrebutted by an opponent. And it is here, in the silence of the notary's office, not in the public square, that the real war for status begins. The only weapon capable of piercing the armor of legal presumptions is the affidavit, a written statement made under oath. When you declare, "I am a living man, and I revoke the right to administer my trust," the system is obligated to respond. This is not a request, it is a notice. The auditor watches as red ink on paper becomes threads that either bind or free a person. Yet for this document to function, it must be flawless, because any error in wording turns the shield into a target. The most radical move in this game is called a UCC-ODIN financing statement, a uniform commercial code form normally used by banks to record a security interest in a debtor's property. Some researchers attempt to hack the matrix by filing this form against themselves. The logic is devastatingly simple. The living person records a priority claim on all the property and name of their strawman, becoming the secured creditor of their own passport, and thereby ceases to be the debtor, paying the trust bills, transforming into the party to whom the trust owes a debt. However, the system, built over centuries, possesses a powerful immunity against such injections of freedom. In the Federal Bureau of Investigation's databases, a special marker is already prepared for such activists. The term paper terrorists did not appear in intelligence reports by accident, because the system treats the mass filing of affidavits in commercial liens as an attack on its infrastructure. When a person starts flooding courts with demands to prove jurisdiction or billing judges for the use of their name, it is treated as a spam attack, blocking the operation of the administrative apparatus. The state's counterattack is often disproportionately brutal, and the most cynical method of neutralizing such awakened individuals is not prison, but a clinic. Renouncing the status of a legal person in court is frequently interpreted as a sign of acute psychiatric disorder. From a psychiatrist's perspective, the statement, "I am not the person named in the passport," sounds like dissociative identity disorder or schizophrenia, and it is simpler for the system to declare you incompetent and prescribe involuntary treatment than to acknowledge the legal validity of your claims. The auditor has seen hundreds of broken lives. People who have read their fill of forms treat complex legal constructs as magic spells, copy document templates without understanding their commercial substance, and march into court expecting the judge to flee in terror. But without a fundamental knowledge of law, without understanding negotiable instruments, these attempts look like cargo cult. You cannot sail a ship simply by putting on a captain's cap. Successful cases of exiting from under jurisdiction do exist, but they are isolated and never public. Real professionals do not shout about sovereignty on YouTube. They conduct quiet correspondence, using commercial law as a scalpel rather than a club, understanding that freedom is not the absence of a passport, but the ability to competently administer one's own contractual relations. The fundamental mistake of resistance lies in the illusion that one can live in society, enjoying its benefits, without paying for this with freedom. The prison cell in which we feel we have been locked by deception has always been open, and we continue to sit in it not because of a secret elite conspiracy, but because of our own silent daily consent. The state did not steal your will by force. It bought it in exchange for comfort, and you accepted that deal. Looking at the metropolis through the filters of thermal imaging and financial flows, the auditor sees not the chaos of city life, but a perfectly tuned circuit board, where every person is a transistor generating current. And the most terrifying thing in this picture is not that the system is draining this resource, but that each of us voluntarily plugs in the cord ourselves. We search for the guilty parties in high offices, but the legal truth is much closer. In your wallet, in your glove compartment, in your phone. Every time you use a zip code to receive a package, you are acknowledging federal territorial division, not geographic. Every time you present a driver's license, you are agreeing that you are not a free traveler, but a driver, a person engaged in commercial transport who is obligated to comply with statutes. This is the concept of implied consent. The system says, since you use our roads and our protection, you have accepted our offer and recognized yourself as our subject. The ancient Romans who laid the foundation of this system were cynical and honest. One of their chief maxims states, Qui vult decipiatur. Let he who wishes to be deceived be deceived. This is not mockery but a legal principle. If you conduct yourself as a child who needs a guardian, the state will gladly assume that role, taking your legal capacity in exchange. And there is another brutal rule. Vigilantibus, non dormientibus, iura subveniunt. The law aids the vigilant, not the sleeping. Debinosto David% of people who dream of freedom and sovereignty would not survive it for a single day, because exiting the status of a person means the immediate loss of all social safety nets, pensions, guarantees, and even the right to call the police in the conventional sense. You become the captain of a single-handed vessel in an ocean where every storm is exclusively your problem. Freedom is not a festival of disobedience. It is the freezing cold of total personal accountability. And this is precisely why the strawman system is so resilient. It sells safety in exchange for rights. And we agree to be dead cargo in the ship's hold because there they feed you and you don't have to stand at the helm. Are you ready for that? Or do you simply enjoy complaining about the jailers while sitting in an open cell? The philosophy of the living man shatters against everyday life. How do you buy bread without an ID? How do you treat a toothache without insurance? The system is built such that leaving it turns you into an outcast, a ghost invisible to radar. And this is by design, not to destroy you, but to keep you in the economic cycle. Because without your straw man, you cannot generate liquidity, and you become useless to a market that simply stops seeing you. The case file man versus person has swollen with evidence, but there is no indictment because the prison cell is locked from the inside. We turned the key ourselves the first time we agreed that our name written in capital letters on a bank card is who we are. An investigation spanning 350 years has led to a simple truth. The cestui kva act of a cestui was not a clerk's error. It was the foundation of a new reality in which living people were replaced by paper trusts. We have established that the birth certificate is a warehouse receipt, and our signatures are the issuance of money. Every time you sign for the receipt of a loan or a fine, you are not spending money, you are creating it, acting as a liquidity generator for a system that has you listed as dead cargo. Now that the entire scheme is visible, from the dock ports of Admiralty law to the closed pools of Wall Street, it becomes clear. We were not deceived. We were simply presented with an offer we never read. The straw man is your avatar for entering the commerce matrix. Without it, you cannot buy a plane ticket or open an account. The problem is not the existence of the avatar, but total identification with it. You came to believe that the mask had fused to your face. This knowledge is toxic because it destroys the comfortable illusion of the state as a caring parent. It is not. It is a trading corporation in which you are an inventory number. And if this breakdown has shifted your perspective, if you now see barcodes where you once saw merely documents, write in the comments, "I see the code." That is the only way to know that on the other side of the screen, there are living, thinking observers and not simply units of traffic. Judges in robes beneath flags with gold fringe are not villains. They are administrators of your ignorance, waiting for you to assert your rights competently in the language of the commercial code, not slogans. The system has no interest in your awakening, yet it is obligated to acknowledge it if you do everything correctly. The law protects the vigilant and uses the sleeping as fuel, and that is fair, however brutal it may seem. True freedom in the 21st century is life in a state of quantum superposition. You must be able to put on the mask of a person when entering a bank or a court and remove it when you return home. You must understand that your legal name is a firm you manage, but are not. The system owns only what you have given it. It owns the paper, the trust, the numbers on a server, but it is powerless before anyone who has grasped the nature of the game. Because no bank can issue a bond on your soul until you yourself sign the paper transferring the rights. Look at the ocean. In maritime law, water is chaos, commerce, and death. But for a living person, water is the beginning of life. The paper boats return to the water. Let them sail. Let the system trade its phantoms, indices, and debts. That is their accounting, not yours. You stand on solid ground. You breathe. You exist without seals and permits. Your name is merely a credit at the end of a film. But you are not the credits. You are the one who watched the film, and the case is closed. Please write in the comments what you think of this breakdown. I genuinely need to understand whether it has shifted your perspective. Now that you can see how the document in your family folder is constructed, are you prepared to keep signing off on your legal fiction? Or will you try speaking to the system in its own language? And one more thing, do you find it easier to watch horizontal video or vertical, formatted for the phone?